Coming up, Sky Eagle Collection takes on New York Fashion Week. Native representation on corporate boards is rare. The Forest Service strengthens nation-to-nation relations. Plus, All My Relations Gallery builds community. And we meet a father who carries on the hoop dance tradition. I am Mackenzie Allen Charmley. Join us for these interviews and more on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Chinangale, we're so glad you could join us. Sky Eagle Collection is an avant-garde native fashion brand headed for New York Fashion Week. Dante Biss-Grayson is its co-founder and designer. Let's watch an interview with this Osage artist and veteran.
My brand, the Sky Eagle Collection, will be showing a series of new native fashion, native avant-garde. It's going to be great. It's not a lot of native designers make it to those spaces and those platforms, so it's nice to be able to, represent and also remind everybody out there that we're still here and that we can also compete on these big stages.
Did you envision your brand in a space like this, and where do you see it going in the future now that you've made it to this point?
So I have a lot of strategic planning as far as like goals, long term, like 5 years, 10 years, where I want to scale up certain parts of the brand. I'm going to branch out into, like ranch wear. I'm also going to be doing media consultations for other companies on how to grow and also how to build a brand. Also cold weather gear like ski weather. But the big goal is that I know it's pretty bold, but, I was born in Santa Fe and Tom Ford, lived there. I'd love to be the first global native and veteran-owned fashion brand that is, shoulder to shoulder with Gucci. So I'm going to aim high.
I like that. What are you most excited for people to see from Sky Eagle Collection during this time in New York?
New York is going to be, there's so many things going on. I'd say the main area is the native avant-garde. For fashion, the brand kind of focuses on what is like new native warriors, men and women in these different spaces, in boardrooms, as state representatives, leaders, teachers, doctors, that type of thing. And so the brand has clothing, native design from my tribe, from the Plains, ribbon work. And then I made it real modern and deconstructed certain things. So like, for instance, like this tie, it's something that these new warriors can be honored to wear and also feel empowered in these spaces that they're representing. So yeah, that'll be the main thing. And also in New York, I have a lot of trench coats. Also just have a few surprises as well. I'm doing some kind of real abstract pieces. So more to follow on that.
Your experience as a veteran and the MMIW epidemic were big inspirations for your brand. Could you tell us about the relationship between your designs and the issues Native communities face?
Absolutely. The brand started, my daughter, we're both Eagle Clan, and I wanted to, as a first son, Lompa in my tribe, also Eagle Clan being a leader, protector of the family, the tribe, the nation. So I looked at my daughter, and, I came back from overseas, the military and all that, and found out about the MMIW epidemic. And I'm like, we need to do something about this. And it expanded more into all of the issues that are impacting Indian country. lack of access to education, healthcare, and the outcomes and all that. A lot of high rate of suicide, a lot of different things. And so, like, I decided, what can I do about it? So that's one core pillar of the brand is social justice. Build a platform, e-commerce, media, social media, whatever, to be able to bring awareness to an issue, and then also to inspire action. So a lot of people who support Sky Eagle wearing these clothing in these spaces so that they say, okay, we can go out there and take action to mitigate these issues.
That was designer Dante Biss-Grayson. Fashion is big business represented by many corporations, but who has a voice in these companies? Mark Trahant finds out. Let's take a look.
There are not many stores that are more high dollar than Saks Fifth Avenue. It's a little Hollywood, New York, all glitz. But there is another story, one about colonization. Think about your day. We are all surrounded by corporate influences. Companies tell us what's good to eat, where we should shop, or how to save our money. Then it's been that way for a long time. And that brings us back to Saks. It's owned by one of the first corporations to trade with Indigenous people, Hudson's Bay, a company that opened its doors in 1607. These companies have been selling to us for a long time. But what if Indigenous people were included? What if we had representation in this framework? You see, corporations, like governments, have a structure, and that includes a board of directors. These are the men and a few women who are legally obligated to run those companies. And in 5 centuries, few Indigenous people have been invited to a seat at that table. In Chicago, Mary Smith, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, is changing that narrative.
Well, I'm a lawyer, and I focused on corporate governance for a lot of my career and also highly regulated industries. And so a few years back, I started wanting to be on corporate boards, but I find it really fascinating and interesting and hope that I'm making a difference too, because as a board member, you're helping set a direction for a company and an organization, and help them overcome their challenges and, hopefully help people.
There are some 4,000 companies traded on Wall Street. Each has a professional board member who is responsible for corporate governance. The number of American Indians and Alaska Natives represented on those boards is far less than 0.1%. Smith has the resume for this type of post. She is an attorney, and she has been the chief executive officer for the U.S. Indian Health Service, a $6 billion a year operation.
I think for most people, you're not going to get a call out of the blue. Some people do, but I think you have to put yourself out there and, first of all, ask yourself, why do I want to be on a corporate board? And what value will I bring? And then also put yourself out there so that people know that you want to be on a corporate board, because there are recruiters that recruit for corporate boards, but the vast majority of board seats are still filled through networking.
Smith is on the board for PTC Therapeutics, Inc. It's a publicly traded global biopharmaceutical company that helps provide medicine to patients with rare disorders. This is a job, and she is paid more than $30,000 a year to serve, according to the company's report with the Securities and Exchange Commission. On top of that, she is awarded both options and stocks that depend on the success of the company. These together could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, $30,000 is a lot of money. It's not as much as the average board seat. According to the search firm Spencer Stewart's annual report, the total average compensation for a board seat is $312,000 per year. This type of compensation shows that serving on a corporate board is a good gig. Yet the number of Indigenous people who hold such seats is really tiny. But this is a moment when that could be changing. More regulators are asking companies to show they are recruiting and appointing diverse directors. More regulators are asking companies to show how they are recruiting and appointing diverse directors. And more investors are judging companies based on their diversity and inclusion results. Assemblyman James Ramos serves in the California legislature, and he explains the logic of this law.
It's very important to have representation, especially from the Native American community, because it serves as two different folds. One, to make sure that the representation of not only California's First People, but the nation's First People has a voice in driving the economics of our communities and of our state and of our nation.
And there is another important lesson. Boards are appointed from a network of other board members. So for hundreds of years, white men looked around and appointed each other, white men, people they knew. Now that net is being cast wider because people like Mary Smith have their own networks.
I would love to see more Native Americans on boards, and I hope that some people would start to say, yeah, I could do that, and then try to put themselves out there to be on the radar for people being on board.
The challenge for corporate boards is to get beyond their usual suspects, to look for the talent pool that is Indian country. In Chicago, I'm Mark Trahant for ICT Newscast.
Many lands held sacred by tribes are controlled by the U.S. Forest Service. ICT's Shirley Sneve interviewed Chief Randy Moore about tribal consultation.
There's a renewed interest in trying to work with the tribes. You know, we've put together a tribal action plan. We've also had personal visits, myself and the Undersecretary, out to Indian country up in the North and South Dakota. We have a couple of other meetings scheduled for this week. So we're really trying to renew and even escalate, if you will, that level of interest in tribal issues and concerns. I think what you'll see is us enter into a lot more agreements like the shared stewardship agreements, where we are sharing leadership and co-managing in some cases. And so I think you'll see a lot of those things taking place now. As a matter of fact, we have about 11 shared stewardship agreements now. We have another 60 or so that's in the works. I think 40 or so that's in the works that we're trying to work through now. And what that demonstrates is a real commitment that this administration has toward working with the tribes. Ultimately, you know, we have to do a better job of, first of all, being educated about what some of the tribal interests are. And, you know, we can talk about these types of things, but it's different when you go and you spend a week with the tribes riding around in the truck, listening to the concerns and the interests. And the Undersecretary Wilkes and I did just that a couple months back, and it gave us a level of understanding that we would not have gotten by sitting at this desk here in Washington, D.C., or just attending meetings here and there. It's really going out on the ground and really understanding ultimately what is it that many of the tribes want. And they want their land back. While I cannot give them the land back, we can do everything we can within our power to work with the tribes to make sure that we are an inclusive organization, making sure that we are including the tribes in not only how we manage these lands, but how should we be managing these lands? You know, looking at the traditional tribal practices, for example. When you look at the 10-year strategy on wildfire reduction, you know, it's really how do we restore prescribed fire back to the landscape in these fire-adapted ecosystems that the tribes was doing great with many, many years before this country became known as America. And so I do think there are lessons learned from traditional tribal practices. And when you integrate that with the science, I'm just excited about what the possibilities are going forward. If you take the western part of the U.S., and if you look at the conditions that the landscapes are in now, we want to put fire back on the landscape, but we know that we also have to remove some of the thick vegetation that's on the landscapes now. And so while we're developing this plan, what better way than to sit down with the tribes now to say, what is it that we're trying to achieve? And how do we maintain it once we achieve it? And this is where I think the tribes could have a monumental role in what happens on these lands that they care so much about, as well as us caring about them too. And so, you know, Shirley, I think what you'll see is just a genuineness for including the tribes in how we manage these lands. I think what you'll see is a genuineness of us being inclusive as we go about. Now, I understand too, we're doing a lot. In this past year and a half, we've been doing a lot, but we also have a lot more to do. We have a lot more to understand, and we don't understand it yet. And it's one thing for me as the chief to say that this is what we're intending to do. It's another thing when you look at the organization all the way down to the ground level, making sure that we all have the same level of understanding, making sure that we all have that same level of commitment to make a difference in what we're doing out there, what our intents are. We're looking at some new opportunities up on the grasslands in the Dakotas now, and particularly with the Lakotas. And so I think you'll see a lot of those kinds of agreements coming to fruition this year. It's interesting for me, and that's why I said, it's one thing to even study about it and to sit in meetings and learn about it. But it's totally different going out on the ground, riding over that ground with some of the tribes who has a tradition and has a history of those lands. For me, it was really educational to look at the beginnings of those lands being reservations, only to be not reservations, only to be turned into grasslands, federal grasslands. And so I think that we have an obligation and a responsibility, and we also have the opportunity to share in how those grasslands are being managed. And so we're looking at trying to figure out how can we move forward in a more inclusive manner that are engaging with the tribes and including the tribes on how we might co-manage some of these same lands. It's one thing for me to say something, but I would encourage you to monitor the actions that we take going forward over the next couple of years. Our intentions are good, but if there's no fruition to the intentions, then the intentions are worthless. And so I just would say stand by and be ready to engage with us, help us to learn the traditional values and methods that have meant so much to you and many other tribes through the years.
That was Forest Service Chief Randy Moore. When we come back, a unique Minneapolis gallery brings community together. Stay with us. When Indigenous people leave their homelands for the city, how do they find connections to culture? For many years, urban Indians in Minneapolis have gravitated towards the Phillips neighborhood and Franklin Avenue. The American Indian Cultural Corridor is home to All My Relations Arts Gallery. Director Angela Two Stars tells us more.
The American Indian Cultural Corridor is the most dense area of urban American Indians in Minneapolis. Our gallery is located directly on Franklin Avenue, and we are a kind of cultural hotspot that uplifts and promotes contemporary American Indian art on Franklin Avenue. We're a cultural destination, a tourist destination in the Twin Cities.
And what kind of art shows does All My Relations feature?
We have a variety of art. Our purpose, our mission is to uplift the strength of contemporary American Indian artists. And so we do that through a variety of exhibitions that highlight solo artists, group exhibitions, all around topics that are important and relevant to American Indian people, issues around like identity, culture, language, family, everything that is important to our community and the American Indian culture at large is what we highlight in our exhibitions. And artists just have a way of sharing these important messages through their artwork that the general audience can able to embrace and understand and learn about who we are as American Indian people.
And what kind of partnerships help bring the arts to life in your area?
We have a variety of partnerships. Right now, we're working with Hennepin Theater Trust on a large-scale public art cohort called the We Are Still Here cohort. This year, we're featuring 3 artists along with a mentor artist who are working on mural design. And that allows this group of artists to learn the skills and techniques of working in mural art. And that is to share that visibility of American Indian people through artworks on large-scale public facades along Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis and the American Indian Cultural Corridor. We've also had partnerships with the Minnesota Department of Transportation and other organizations that come to us looking to share knowledge of the American Indian people in the Twin Cities with their audiences. And so we do a lot of like cross-pollination of our audience bases.
I know in the past you've worked with writers. Could you touch more on that?
Yes, we have a great program in progress right now. It's called the Native Authors Program, and this is our second year that we've been hosting this group of artists, again, led by a experienced Native author. This year's Art Colson. Our first group was led by Diane Wilson, and these are established, seasoned Native writers, and our goal is to provide opportunity, training, and support to Native writers, and using the same processes that we've done to support Native artists, because our goal is to have more Native writers telling our stories and having more Native writers becoming published writers.
And tell us how the pandemic changed your work and the way that you do business today.
Well, the pandemic, we all started to work remotely and really focused on our internal health as an organization. A lot of our work was focused on supporting artists, because the pandemic impacted artists so much. In Minneapolis, we were dealing with a dual pandemic, which was, the COVID-19, but also the social uprisings after the murder of George Floyd. And so our gallery itself actually ended up becoming a hub for donations that came in after the uprisings during that period of time. And we really worked to support artists in the community and responding to what they needed at the time, and just transitioning ourselves to what the community was needing from our organization, and also taking care of ourselves, focusing on self-care. I think it was a big thing within our organization of making sure that we were all getting through that difficult period together.
You yourself are an artist. Tell us about your work.
Yes, I actually am a practicing public artist. I have a piece in the Walker Art Center, the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden has my piece called Okchiapi, which is a tribute to my Dakota language. I'm currently in the middle of installing an exhibition that opens up this Saturday at St. Catherine's University, and it's called Reconnected, which is sharing the story of how reconnecting with the Dakota language for myself has been part of my own healing journey, and sharing that message with the audience that's coming to view my work, and just reinforcing the vitality of Dakota language and how that translates to other tribal communities who are also working in language revitalization, and how important that is to our cultural healing.
That was Angela Two Stars in Minneapolis. Phoenix is home to the World Hoop Dancing Competition. The Duncan family has been carrying on the tradition for decades. Mark Trahant interviewed Ken Duncan about the family's involvement in the dance.
I taught my sons, all of my sons and my grandchildren how to hoop dance. I used to be a hoop dancer, but I was building an Apache Wiki up at Indian Summer Festival in Milwaukee, Wisconsin one night, and I fell off a ladder, and I have a very bad back now. And so after I couldn't dance anymore, I decided to teach all of my sons, and many of them I've been very happy to say that they have taken a title, and they've placed most of the time second, third, fourth, whatever. But hoop dancing is very much a part of our family activities. I was taught to hoop dance while I was attending Brigham Young University by one of the dancers, and he is still competing in the seniors division. His name is Terry Godell. And with a group from there, we toured throughout the world, hoop dancing until I left the university. And when I came to Phoenix, I taught all of my boys how to hoop dance. And so we have not missed a hoop dance contest, I believe, since its inception at the Herd Museum.
How has it changed over the years? What have you seen with that?
When I first arrived to Phoenix back in the early 80s, when my boys were just 2, 3 years old. Throughout the whole valley, even in the whole state, I believe there were maybe 2 or 3 hoop dancers, and they were very rare. And it was Dennis Alley's, the well-known singer's sons that were the only hoop dancers that I was aware of. But now, to this date, there are so many hoop dancers. I mean, there's hoop dancers everywhere. And so it's become very popular from the 80s to now.
Hoop dancing carries a spiritual meaning. What does that mean for you?
Hoop dancing, we all believe, is that it originated from the Taos Pueblo with a gentleman by the name of Tony Whitecloud that made it very popular. He toured internationally as a hoop dancer with a dance company. He took it out of Taos Pueblo, and so after that, a lot of people caught on to hoop dancing. And so he is the one that popularized the whole idea of hoop dancing. And a lot of Indian tribes throughout Canada and the U.S. have picked up on hoop dancing, and now it seems to be in all of North America.
That was Ken Duncan, and that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.